I guess for me that was always probably quite good because I was, chasing the older brother that was 5 years older type thing. So you're classic, probably more of an experience year than a playing year itself. And then, started to kick on a bit, a few chances. Missed call from my agent at the time, voicemail, all that good stuff. I guess long story short, it was they've decided not to renew your contract. I think it's probably two-pronged, isn't it? It's being able to have that mental clarity that feedback isn't. And we spoke before about that kind of defining yourself, and don't let your environment dictate who you want to be, and it's very much aligned to that, I would say. Right for me or other mentors to say, I think you should do this. That's something we've discussed as a group. Is
Welcome to the Career Clarity Podcast with me, Ryan Gonsalves.
Thanks. Yeah, it should be good fun.
Yeah, well, I think it will be. As long as we enjoy it, then...
Absolutely. Can say anything on here, can't you?
Yeah, well, that's it. So we'll have a good laugh. But certainly, as always, I always look forward to these conversations. And for me on a Friday evening, it's a really good way for me to sort of wrap up the week and have a good chat with someone like yourself, learn your story a little bit, and talk about all that is finding a bit of clarity after sport.
Yeah, we're polar opposite ends of the scale. It's a Friday morning. We're just in for a nice long, hopefully sunny bank holiday weekend. So it's a good start to it, Ryan. Good start to it.
Very nice, good man. Well, listen, Tom, let's get us started and just let us know, what is it that you are up to nowadays?
Yeah, so and look, I'm sure we'll get into it, but I post sport and post rugby found myself in the world of finance, the world of business. So I initially actually qualified as a chartered accountant. That was with KPMG back in the day when I qualified. So I'm now working for a firm called Interpath Advisory, and more recently trying to spend most of my time working, advising, kind of consulting type work in the sports industry, which is really interesting. Having come from sport, having played, to be able to, I guess, go back to your roots, go back to what you enjoy is, it's good, and it's enjoyable. Some of the work I'm involved in at the minute.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, interestingly, for you to go into business and sounds into the into a finance world, what made you pick that as a path? I mean,
it's one I get asked a lot, and look, my straight answer is I kind of didn't really. It was very much one at the time where, when I moved away, it was I need a job here. I need something for the CV. I need something, looking at buying a house and things like that. It was very much right. What can I do and what can I get involved with? And it was actually through a rugby contact at the time, and we'll obviously go into networks and things like that. But it was very much look, there's an opportunity here. It's it's an industry that you can go. You've not been to uni, you've not done anything like that, so you can go. You can box off some qualifications, and then look what you do after it is fine. But at least you've got something to stand on. So that was the crux of it, really. Was it something that I ever envisaged going, I always want to do my accountancy qualifications? Honest answer is absolutely not.
Very few people do.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But, you look back and look at the decision. At the point when I made the decision, it was, I need to go and do something here. And look, it's a great base for me to now go and do whatever I want to do, really.
Yeah, yes, it is. And I think one of the great things about accounting is, well, if you believe in the world, then money will. Accounting is always going to be there. Someone's always going to have to split finances and pay tax and do that kind of stuff. So that is what I remember during COVID, and sort of get to these points on, well, will business continue? I was listening to another show about airline and travel, and you just think,
Mm,
well, if you believe in humanity and mankind, you've got to believe we're always going to we'll always have to keep paying tax. Once the world comes back,
yeah.
we're going to travel. You kind of just got to jump into some of these things.
Yeah. Look, and it's such a big industry, right? I think people think accounting and stuff like that, and you think tax returns and all that good stuff. And look, that's my worst nightmare. If I was being honest, I couldn't think of anything worse than doing that. But it's you go into that type of industry, and the crux of it is you have to go and get your accountancy qualifications. That's kind of your base.
Yeah,
Your base, and like all your top performing S&C coaches, they will have had a base level that they've had to go and do. So
yeah,
yeah, it's if someone asked me to come and help them out on the finances, would I be able to help? Probably not. But look, it's there, and it's done its job. Put it that way.
yes. I'm sure it's you've intentionally locked it away in the back of your mind. It's like, I don't want to go find that again. But
Yeah,
has
sure,
to.
sure.
Yeah. Now, look, I'm interested there, and perhaps we'll come back to it. But we talk about your role in that sports industry, and I'm sure there are going to be
Mm,
many people thinking, well, what does that mean? So,
yeah.
just in a way, now, what is I guess what is your role in that? Working as you are now, how does that what does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question. I think that the easiest way to probably put it is imagine your classic kind of strategic advice consulting type work that you see in every other area of business and industry. Um, Sport now is becoming a lot more business minded and business focused,
Mhm.
especially with the money that's involved. Football is probably a big one where you see the regulations surrounding it. You see the money that's coming in. You see the investment through private equity, private ownership, things like that. So there's a huge space now for almost those business-minded individuals and the strategic advice that go around the seams with it. Really. So look, it's nice and it's positive for me because I understand the sport and the performance side of sporting organisations. But then I've
Yeah,
also had the training and the experience with big blue chip companies, companies in other industries and other spaces. So, look, they're a different beast.
yeah,
Football clubs to name one, but other big industries where you've almost got two businesses inside one. You've got sport and performance, and then
yeah.
commercial marketing, all that good stuff that feed into one company at the end of the day.
And so, how do you think, or do you think you're better off having been a pro athlete to work in that space rather
Yeah,
than coming into it without it?
yeah, absolutely. There's you probably see it in every walk of life. Really, there's you understand the lingo, you understand the terminology, you understand, okay, this decision, how is it going to affect performance, how is it going to affect my players.
Yeah,
And if you come solely from a business point of view, you don't possibly appreciate the kind of on the ground impacts that it has on sport. Having come through high performance systems, high performance environments, and knowing what business decisions kind of the impact that they have on you as a player,
yeah,
it's easier to understand it when you're on the other side of the fence.
yeah,
An example I'd give is, a player or performance director might say, "Oh, we can't do this because it'd have a minimal. There might be an impact to on pitch performance, something like that."
yeah,
Now, if you've not been in that environment yourself, you'd go, the way you travel, or
mm,
the type of pitch you train on, that can't have any difference to what you do. But you know full well it does. You walk out onto the training pitch, you like
mm,
everything where it is. It's those one percenters, isn't it, that make a huge
yeah,
difference.
yeah. It is. You understand like you say, the nuance, the just those slight differences, and indeed where perhaps where value can be created or at least appreciated by a club as well. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, they're doing that bit really well. That's going to help
Mm.
them go far versus that other one that's making pure commercial decisions, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, it's sports, I guess, in a really, really interesting space at the minute. It's huge growth in the women's side of things, which I think is incredibly interesting to be involved in. It's something that historically has not had enough investment, enough people watching.
Yeah.
So to almost for clubs, for organisations to be able to dictate the way they take the women's game with such resources at their hands is huge opportunity. If you were to do it 20 years ago, it would be like grassroots sport everywhere. But
Yeah, yeah.
clubs that are bolting on a women's team now, they can take them anywhere they want.
Yes, well, that's right, and it is, like you say, it's an exciting and fascinating space. I mean, just in the, I'm really fascinated in the way the women's sport will evolve, in the sense that it doesn't need to replicate. And I was saying it the other day, but it doesn't need to replicate the way the
No,
men's sport have grown, because
no.
the platforms are different, the industries are different,
Yeah,
and
the audiences are different. The people watching, it's
yeah,
yeah. I mean, look, we've seen it over here in the UK with Ilona Mayer coming into the rugby space,
mm,
and the growth that's seen just around Bristol, and the hype on social media, the amount of people that are going to games that would never have stepped foot in that stadium because of a woman who's got a huge influence
yeah,
online. It's
yeah.
it's cool.
Yeah, you're right. Listen, it is fascinating. I suppose. Listen, I'm bring us back in, talk a little bit about you and your journey,
Yeah,
but
sorry, off piece.
it's good because it's interesting, right? It is
Yeah.
interesting. And so listen, we were chatting about then, yes, you've got some of this grounding from an accounting of that business perspective.
Yeah.
But of course, one of the key things you have is sport. So, take me back. I suppose I want to get a bit of an understanding of how did sport influence you.
Yeah,
Where
sure.
where were you growing up, and how was sport an influence to you in that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, probably nothing special, to be honest. Growing up as a kid, I had an older brother, older sister. Grew up in what you'd describe as a kind of pretty normal family. Mum was a teacher. My dad worked in kind of project management side of things, but we all loved and enjoyed sport. It was what we did at the weekends. It was what we liked to go and do on a road outside the house. If there was a ball involved, we'd go and have a kick around type thing.
Yeah,
But I guess for me, that was always probably quite good because I was, chasing the older brother that was 5 years older type thing. So you're probably always competing unknowingly and unwantingly from an early age. But so that was kind of how we grew up. I'd probably say my dad was more on the football side of things, but
yeah,
picked up a rugby ball when early teens. And just enjoyed it. Just liked playing. Took us down to the local rugby club. It was a small club called Stockport at the time, which look is still fairly local. And yeah, just got a bit of a love for the game really. My brother played there. My dad used to coach my team at the time. So did all the junior age group stuff there. And then, to be honest, it was only probably when I went to high school that I started almost not taking it seriously, but going, this is I'm doing all right here. I just used to
yeah,
play for the fun.
yeah,
Um, the way it works, obviously, with rugby union over here is I think it's from under 15s. You start to get pulled into the kind of county teams, so
yeah.
Cheshire, Lancashire, things like that. Um,
And was that sort of the path that came to you at around that age, 15, 16?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And do you know what? I'd be lying if I could remember how it worked, but I think the system was you played for your club, someone would kind of, have a watch at some of the larger competitions and they cherry pick a few players out. So because of that, getting involved with the county stuff, I then got looped into the kind of Sale Sharks
hmm,
junior academy system. But look, again, a few years back, that would have just been an evening a week type thing, just to stay in the system.
yeah,
So that was great. You go from you go from playing as a kid and just having a kick around to suddenly you're in a kind of bit of a professional setup, and you
Set
see
up.
in
Yeah.
the first team walk around as a 15-year-old kid. It's
Yeah.
cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that. I was then, I finished, got up to sixth form, so got up to kind of the college years, did the county stuff again, and got picked ultimately for one of the England under 17s teams.
Right. Okay.
So
Is-
again, that was through the county system. So they have a county comp, and then they have a kind of North England versus South England, etc.
Yeah.
All funnels into one. So
Yeah. Well,
I
I,
managed. Go on, Ryan.
I'm interested then. So
Yeah,
at that time,
yeah,
17, getting selected into that England, young England system, right? That young
yeah.
England pathway. Um, what did you start to envision as your future? Where did you start to let yourself dream?
Yeah, and do you know, we'll probably come on to it, but at that time of my rugby career, that was a really, really enjoyable time of playing.
Hmm.
I loved my rugby then. It
Yeah.
was, I was fit, I was healthy, I was playing week in, week out. It was great. Loved it. And then you overlay onto that you're going into an England camp at 17s. I think at the time, we were sharing kind of training camps with the under 20s, and you've got people like Maro Itoje, who was in that a few years
Yeah.
older, 20s setup, and
Hmm.
people like him and Nick Tompkins and those boys who, as a 17-year-old, you're going, oh, Christ, these boys are good. They've just signed Saracens contracts, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but such good fun at the same time. We took it seriously. We took it really seriously. As would any kind of international
Yeah.
junior camp. But look, we had, and whether you know the individuals or not, we had a guy called John Fletcher leading it at the time, who was an unbelievable coach. The way you kind of opened your eyes to the game, to expressing yourself, things like that. As a
Yes.
junior age grade coach, he was unbelievable,
Right.
and
Yeah.
made those years really fun. Um, and look, it was off the back of that, I guess, that then once I finished my time at school, I was ultimately offered a contract to go and join Sale. So that was
Yeah.
how that came into light.
Right. And so, like you said, that kicked in after school. You've got the schoolboys.
Yeah.
What was for you? What was education? Where did education, or at least schoolwork, how did that rank in your priorities?
Do you know what? It was probably quite high. And it probably goes back to growing up in what I'd describe as a fairly normal household. It
Mhm.
was um, it. I guess, to put it bluntly, it's not like you see football academies these days. Where the priority is your football academy, and they kind of facilitate school on the side. I think still
Yeah.
with rugby, you go to school as you do, you GCSEs, A levels, all that good stuff, and you go to visit your club in evenings and weekends.
Mm.
So look, I think in rugby it's still very much go through school properly,
Yeah.
and we'll pick you up on the side. So I enjoyed it. I had a great group of friends. Um, I did pretty well in school. It was always very much still no idea what I wanted to do at
Yeah.
school, to be honest.
Right.
But
Okay.
picked up all my GCSEs, all my A levels, and came out with some some pretty good results. To be fair,
Yeah. Yeah. But then you got this opportunity to go on a well, basically get a contract and
yeah,
play. Yeah.
yeah. And look at it was probably a no brainer for me at the time. It was, having grown up playing as a kid. Someone says, look, there's an opportunity to
Hmm.
come play full time. Why would you say no? And look, I had a really supportive family of it at the time. He said, look, it's an opportunity. Go, and what's the worst that could happen, type thing.
Mm.
You go and do it for a year, and if it
Yes.
doesn't work out, then you're in the same boat. So
Yeah. Yeah. And so where did it, how did it feel? I suppose I want to say is like, where did it take you? You were enjoying it. You were full time. Well, in fact, it's quite an important athletic transition going from
yeah.
schoolboy part time to going
Mm.
into that full time environment. What was that initial shift for you like? And, how did you sort of find the balance?
Yeah, so I guess it went very much from so the junior stuff, you're playing all the time, you're doing the England stuff. You go into a completely different world where you're quickly at the bottom of the tree.
Yeah.
You know, it's and look, you know, we used to make a bit of a joke about it, but it was always the standard things that you know. There's the lads that have come through the academy. They're the youngest. You know, some joke and you know the bag holder type things of training.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I've cleaned many a pair of football boots in my time.
yeah, absolutely. So you go from kind of I don't like using the term big dog, but you go from you know
Yeah.
you were picked every week to suddenly you were absolute bottom of the pile,
Yeah.
um,
How did
which
that
was
feel?
um, there's a period where because it's so new you still get the excitement.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like you know you knew it was coming, you knew that was what to expect type thing, but when it was still so fresh to you and you're surrounded by you know household names, you know you walk in, you got Danny Cipriani was starting at the time. You got like some of the All Blacks like Sam Tuatupo, Dan Braid, people like that who you're looking up and going, I'm actually I'm actually kind of training with these guys and on you know hats in the mix for selection on the same plate as some of these guys. So very daunting at the time, but incredibly exciting at the same time. I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so getting that balance then comes through Sale, making debuts
Yeah,
and sort
yeah,
of pushing on. What did you dream of? Where did you think you were going?
yeah. So I guess I probably never thought that far ahead, but I always loved, you know, I was loving being involved in the international setup at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I guess the goal for me was very next step approach. It was look, how do I then embed myself and get into that sale team?
Yeah.
Um, and you know, I guess to fast forward, so I did my probably had my first year there, which was you know classic, probably more of an experience year than a playing year itself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you know started to kick on a bit, a few chances. You know, you're playing all the reserves game, you're getting involved on the bench, things like that. So you're starting to, you know, that's the time when you're starting to go,
Mm.
right, how can I kick on here? And then got selected for the England 20s,
Mm.
which at that stage is probably, it goes a step up again because you start to have Junior Six Nations, you know,
Yeah.
Junior World Cup, things like that. Um, but it was actually at that point where I picked up a quad injury on our first game in the Six Nations was against Italy, and
Yeah.
I was a fly half, so quad and kicking was probably a pretty big piece
Yeah.
of your game. But I picked up a quad injury, and then that was probably a pretty big turning point, I would say, for me
Yeah.
in my overall career when I look back.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
In what? Go on, so tell us about that because you know obviously it was.
yeah, no. So you know, I guess you're so used to playing week in week out, and maybe had not experienced a big injury like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so that was I remember playing we were based down in Exeter. We had a game at Italy at Plymouth. I remember flew back home the next day with the England doctor, and you know, luckily there was a consultancy place in Wilmslow up near where I live, and went straight from a scan as you do. You know, your best treatment when
Yeah.
you're in those type of places.
Yes.
And it was yeah, I think he said it's a grade 3 quad tear.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bit of scar tissue around, so we don't want to operate. We'd prefer to rehab,
Yeah.
which was fine. But you know, you're talking for what is a muscle tear, you're talking kind of 6 months
Yeah.
type thing for a
Mm-hmm.
um, which was tough. And I think the worst thing about that was I came back and probably 2 3 games did a similar thing. Not as bad, but you know
Mm-hmm.
it knocked back again. So
Yeah.
I guess to fast forward, I very quickly went from a stage where I was going now I can kick on to suddenly I'd had kind of 18 months of training as such.
Yeah.
Lot
Yeah.
of time when you're in the gym,
Yeah.
watching. You know, I probably had 18 months with 2 games under my belt.
Yeah. What was the considering how you'd been shaped as like you said top dog coming
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah,
then
yeah,
working
yeah.
your way back up England 20 setup, which is obviously awesome,
Yeah.
and then getting these setbacks and trying to go through that period. What was the hardest part during that time for you?
I think the tough thing with injuries is almost the danger of the time to think.
Mm-hmm.
You're not swept up in um, a lot of stuff in sport, especially when you're training. You're so full on, it's so fast speed.
Yeah,
Um, there was a lot of alone time sat on the gym floor doing your rehab when you sat there going, everyone else is out training here, and they've
yeah,
got a game at the weekend, and I'm doing,
yeah,
some pretty basic movements here.
yes, yeah. Well, so how did you fill your time then during those rehab, that 18 months or so?
Yeah, so look, it was still, you still kind of fitted into a schedule as you would normally. So look, I'd come in, we'd try and get in the gym at the same time as
Mhm. Yeah,
everyone else. So, try and stay involved, do your gym sessions with everyone else. Then on-field sessions, probably split it between a bit of treatment and then going out and watching.
hmm,
And then other time like that was then how can you just fit in some extra rehab and stuff on the side
yeah,
around your classic, your team meetings, your analysis.
hmm, yeah,
But that's probably one of the more challenging things, when you were looking at, okay, what's the game this week? Who are we playing?
yeah,
How are we influencing what we're doing on the pitch? And you kind of sat there going, oh, I've got another 3 months until I can run again, guys. So
yes,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, it is a tough period when you're in there, like you're saying, during the day.
mm,
Good that you can kind of hit that schedule, um, but then you've got your evenings or the afternoons
yeah,
after training, and it's like, well, I'm not knackered because I haven't played. I haven't. I've not
yeah,
done anything. I feel great.
yeah, absolutely. And that was so that was a challenging period, but
Hmm.
again, maybe because you're still fairly new to it, you do just kind of get swept up. But um, that kind of evolved really because I got back, I started playing again, and things were. I think I'd maybe just signed an extra 2 years or something on my contract a year before. So I knew I had a bit of time to,
Yeah,
okay, let's rehab, let's get back to playing, all that good stuff. So got myself back fit, got the body feeling good again. And then it was at the end of one of the seasons. I think I sat down and spoke to a guy called Dan Braid, who I mentioned before. So he
yeah,
was, a lot of people say he would have had the All Black seven shirt if it wasn't for Richie McCaw type thing. He
mm,
was an
yeah,
unbelievable player. And he just mentioned out of nowhere. He said, "Look, if you wanna go and play out in New Zealand, let me know. I've got loads of contacts."
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so I, at the time, frustrated, not playing much, kind of bit his hand off and said, "Look, I'd love to, like, let me go and speak to management and stuff, see if we can make it happen." So I basically ended up getting kind of a loan contract, moving out to
yeah,
Auckland,
yeah, yeah.
playing there, and obviously you'll know being over in Oz that the culture for rugby is just
Mm,
it's just
yeah,
so different.
yes, yeah,
You walk out on the streets and kids are kicking rugby balls around as opposed to football. There's touch rugby going on everywhere,
yes,
um, and the rugby out there was unbelievable. I loved it. Um, so I spent, just about 6 months there playing, played a full season. Um, and it was actually, so my contract was, I guess to step back, my contract with Sale at that point was coming up to its end.
hmm,
Um, and it was very much, spoken to them, okay, we're sorting whatever out. It's final agreements, etc., all that good stuff. So, but you're on the other side of the world, so you're quite separated from it. So I was there, I was playing, probably only had a month or so left to go on the kind of the New Zealand side of things, and it's something around that probably not a lot of people know about in terms of how it came about, how it happened. But I I woke up one morning from a text from my missus, and said, "Have you seen it?" Or I kind of had 3 missed calls or something. I was like, "What the hell's going on here?" Basically, there was a tweet that had gone out, Every year they do it. Thanks to X, Y, and Z for your time at the club.
Yeah. Yeah.
My name was on it.
Right.
And I was kind of like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Missed call from my agent at the time, voicemail, all that good stuff. I guess long story short, it was they've decided not to renew your contract.
Yeah.
Had anyone had a conversation with me? No.
Hmm.
And I had tried to ring the director of rugby at the time. Nothing, absolutely nothing.
Hmm.
Managed to get hold of one of the coaches who he was great. I had a good chat with him, and he was I guess very sympathetic of the situation. It was kind of out
Mm.
of his control at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And look,
Yeah.
I absolutely get that, but yeah, that was a tough time. Put it that way.
That's a terrible way to
Yeah,
find out.
yeah. Look, and it's something that you probably don't speak about, and it's something that probably at that time was because it was tough. It was tough to manage.
Yeah.
It's probably not something that you widely share as such, but
Mhm.
and it was always, I look back on it now, and probably one of the driving factors is you sit on it and you go, everything that you do on a day-to-day basis, you're like, I would never want to treat someone like that or manage someone in that way. You look at work on what you're doing at work, whether it's
Yeah.
same industry, different industry, and you go, God, you just wouldn't do that.
No, that's right. What is it? What is it about sport that I don't know? I want to say enables that to happen.
Yeah, look, and maybe I was too accepting of it at the time because of that reason, because
Mm.
sport does have a brutal nature, absolutely. And I always understood that going in, always understood it. It was more I appreciate that's kind of what happens and that's the fact, but there is also a genuine management issue, a kind of man to man management kind of
Mhm.
thing that
Mhm.
a phone call would have been nice. Um,
Yeah. Hmm.
so look, sport is like that, and I don't. Do I think it's right? No. Do I think it's probably a bit of a nature of the beast? Yes. And especially with some of the money flying around. Um, but look, there's obviously ways of going about things, isn't
Yes. Yeah. So
there?
look. So you're on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
You get a call, a tweet, a text.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
We're done with you.
yeah, yeah.
What happened next? What was going through your mind?
It's a great question. I think that, to be honest, the couple of days after that were very much a blur.
Right.
Um, and if I'm being honest, excluding maybe being away from family,
Hmm.
I was possibly in a pretty good, like, kind of environment for that to happen
Yeah.
because of the way they live their life, the way they have an attitude to things. It was,
Mm.
rugby to them is just a bit of a crack on the side, and if they do well, they do well, right?
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
they live their life. So maybe I was in a pretty good spot for it.
Mm.
Um, and the fact I was playing week in, week out was, it was
Yes.
one I had something to take my mind off. But it probably also comes back to um, kind of how I grew up, and it was such a normal upbringing as well. Like, family would have supported me through everything. But I still remember when we joke about it. My old man, I think, rang me at the time. He was like, first of all, like, are you all right? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. He was like, we obviously spoke through other options, and there were
Yeah.
opportunities to go and play for champ clubs and things like that.
Hmm.
And then I think he sat there and he went, it's all right. She can go and get a normal job now. And look, that's we joke about it, but that's just kind of the way we grew up. That's the way we lived, and he'd travel anywhere to go and watch me play, and he'd support me with any decision. But we were always quite grounded, is what I'd say.
Mm. So at that point,
Mm.
coming to the end of the season,
Yeah.
did you think, well, that's it, I'm full time, rugby's done for me?
Not immediately, I would say. It took a couple of months. I think we obviously spoke with my agent at the time, spoke to a few contacts, um, and there were a few opportunities to do different things, to play elsewhere, a couple of opportunities overseas.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, there's the championship, but I guess it was very much a case of, come move down to London for a full time role. There's 25 grand a year,
Yes, right.
or come and move to, opportunity in Italy, 30
Hmm.
grand a year type thing. Same
Yeah.
thing. And do I look back and say, do I wish I'd taken them? The nice thing is probably not,
Hmm.
because I went through a period of considering a lot of different things, a lot of different options, and look,
Yeah.
the fear in my head at the time was very much. I think I was 24 at the time. The fear in my head was I go and take a 3 year contract earning 20 grand a year. I get to 27, 28. That contract finishes, and then I go, what on earth do I do now?
Yeah. And
And look,
what?
that it probably helped that I'd had a decent period of time being injured, because you start to then mentally think about, you know, buying a house, doing other things,
Hmm.
what's going to
Yeah.
happen after rugby. You start to kind of mentally tick things over in your head.
Right. Yeah. And so, what were you? I mean, it's good because, like you said, that injury time
Yeah,
meant
yeah, yeah.
that mode of injury got you being able to think a little bit about, well, yeah, I'll come back and then what? And actually, it's
Mm.
all right doing this
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
playing. I'll have an extra
yeah.
drink. It's okay. Um, I'll get away with it, I'm sure. Um, what were you fearful of? What was the fear? Because getting to 27
Mm.
and not having a career, what are the repercussions of that, of being 27 without that experience, that
And
20 grand a year?
yeah, and do you know what? It's an absolutely fair point, and it's something that you'd maybe view it as from another side as there's absolutely nothing wrong with starting again at 27. It's a
Mm.
different way you'd view it. I probably, like I said, looking at buying a house, always minded on, how do I set myself up for my career in the future,
Hmm.
your family, your friends, just making sure you're stable in all aspects of life.
Yeah.
That was probably my fear, right? And having not gone to uni as well, I thought, God, I can't be 27 and then go, uh, I'm going to have to go back to uni now and do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Whether, you know, whether that's right or not, I don't know.
Mhm.
But it didn't feel like it. That felt like one of the worst options for me at the time,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah. How did you how did you make your decision then?
um, I think, look, it was probably speaking to different people. It was, just getting different people's views on things, and
Yeah.
probably that just kind of mentally coming to terms with it, maybe. the
Right. Yeah.
and look, it's something I look back on, the kind of the term acceptance comes
Mm.
into it probably quite a bit, but that's maybe longer term of, that trying to get comfortable with the fact that, well, that's been great for years, that's been a really enjoyable 5 years. um let's go and focus on something else.
Right. So what did you do next then? How did you figure out, right, this is the
Yes.
focus?
So look, and I guess one of the benefits of sport is networks and the people you meet.
Yeah.
Um, and I always talk when I talk to people now in the game and stuff. I say, look, it's prime time to go and meet people, because quite frankly, and whether it's right or wrong, people care about you and pay attention of you when you're in sport and you've got a club attached to you. They want to chat to you. So go and build your network. So Ended up speaking to a couple of people, and look, I was lucky at the time that there was a club near me called Macclesfield, who were in the third tier of rugby at the
Yeah,
time. So they
yeah.
were in National One, which I could go and start a career and still play some rugby on the side, and
Mm.
have a bit of kind of pocket money coming in as a
Yeah,
stabilizer.
yeah,
So that
yeah.
that for me, look, I was lucky with that because it was location, it was close, it was great. But in terms of, I guess, your question about what next, that all came from a conversation with someone through rugby, and they went, I've got a contact who does X, Y, Z in the Big Four.
Hmm.
Go and meet him for a coffee. See what they've got.
Yeah.
And I think I probably spent a month or two just drinking coffee with different people. Put it that
Yes.
way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. I mean, I get it, but it is
Yeah, yeah.
that. Um, it sounds weird, doesn't it? You perhaps, or for many listening, I know they'll be thinking, well, you're not doing anything when you're just going and having
Mm,
coffee with
yeah,
people. It's like you wake up, you have a coffee, you have a drink, and then you come home again. What have you
yeah.
achieved? Um, so as you were going through that, did you
Mm.
feel, yeah, this is great, this, except for the caffeine hit, this
Well,
is
yeah,
best you feel.
absolutely. No, and you don't, because it's not. I think with the whole building your network, making relationships, and it's really challenging at the time to see the benefit when you're in it yourself.
Hmm.
It's only when you look back that, you know, don't get me wrong, you meet some fantastic people and you make some great friends, but a lot of that side of networking is almost playing the long game.
Yeah,
It's okay, that's great, but that's actually only probably going to benefit me in 2 years' time when I come back across them at X event, and I know who they are, and we get chatting again. So I think at the time I was probably quite, I guess, focused on, finding out about how do I get into a role, and how do I, what opportunities are there for me to start a career and things like that. So it was probably quite laser focused on that, I would say.
yeah, yeah,
But certainly when you look back, you think of, okay, that, what you're doing there is great in terms of network building.
yeah, yeah. And so then for you, through that networking
Mm.
period, which is great, and it sounds like you pretty much just followed your nose. You had one that led
Yeah,
to another
yeah, yeah,
one as
yeah.
people directed you. What would you say was that concrete step? What did you end up doing? Because you didn't have uni, you had
Yeah,
limited work experience. What did you decide to jump
yeah,
in?
so it was. I think I ended up just kind of plotting out all my. Okay, here's all my options basically,
Hmm.
and ones where you could walk into a job on day one and you're earning this amount, but what are your kind of your opportunities long term? Is it
Yeah.
gonna you quite boxed in, or can you go elsewhere? Um, so the decision I took actually was, okay, there's a few different roles here they're actually almost apprenticeship type programs within the finance world,
Yeah.
but very much you do a few years of working, but getting your qualifications on the side.
Mm.
And then, once you qualify, there's your qualification, stay with us, or away you go. Um, and the way I saw that was more of, do I know that's what I want to do now? No. But if I look kind of 10 years ahead, does it give me a base that, I can either use to carry on with it, or use to tick off and go and do something else, basically.
Yeah.
So that was the way I kind of viewed those options, I would say.
Yeah. It's a very level-headed, a very logical thought process.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, and again, look, you probably you thank your upbringing, you thank the kind of groundedness approach, but
Yeah.
more just having your family around you as well
Mm.
to bounce ideas off, to question.
Yes.
I I would not have liked to have been in that situation if I was on my own. Put it that way.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. So
think that
you
would be
uh,
tough.
yeah, it would be tough so it'd be tough by yourself. Your family was your network. So I probably missed a question there, but so
Yeah, yeah,
did you move back home?
yeah. Move back home. Yeah, move back home actually. So ended up moving back in with my parents.
Yeah.
It kind of stabilizing time, and then was looking for a house with with my girlfriend at the time.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I guess, look, for many, especially being around other side of the world, coming back, many would
Mm.
see that, may have felt that was a step backwards and been too eager to get out of that environment.
Yeah, I would, and I wouldn't disagree. I think it was tough from a maybe how is this viewed
Hmm.
type thing,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
that's the point. But then it's okay. Well, what else would I be doing? Would I be in London? Would I be in London taking 25 grand a year and
Yeah.
living in a box,
Yeah. I was
in
going
a
to
one
say,
bedroom box?
yeah, if you're lucky.
And you know what, with things like that, probably having to then get some extra work on the side,
Hmm.
things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and people. I guess people always say, "What made you decide to do that?" And I'd be lying if I told you. It seemed right at the time. I think
Mm.
having hardly played for a couple of years because of injury, and then it all coming to an end. It just felt like maybe it's possibly right for me to go and do something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And so, look, that's something else, that feeling, the
Yeah,
feeling
yeah,
took me down that path. And, there is so many individuals have come on here and spoken about, as athletes, we have this intuition, this feeling, this sense
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
what
yeah,
feels good on the field, what feels good off the field, sort of been in tune with that sense. And so you entered into this sort of, I'll say, a quasi apprenticeship
yeah,
of,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
sort of learning on the learning on the job, building up those skills, the study and everything
yeah, 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 yeah,
at the time. I mean, that's a shift from
yeah. Massive,
X months
absolutely
earlier
massive.
been playing out in Auckland to
Yeah,
an office up north.
yeah, huge, absolutely huge. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges I had was more just kind of the environment you're in. You're used to the high paced, high
Yeah,
performance. Something needs doing. We're doing it right now, and we're off. Like this is,
yeah.
and look, maybe I found other things alongside that. I was lucky because I was still playing a bit on the
Yeah.
side with
Hmm.
Mac at the time. You start training a bit more for yourself, things like that. Look, years on, you sat there now, and I still have in my head. I was like, I need to train before work, or I'm just going to
Yeah.
be. I'm just
Hmm.
going I need to feel like I've done something today before work.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was ultimately, I guess, like you say, it was on a feeling.
Yeah. 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 And so going through that, you talk about that environment shift. Sounds
Mm.
like, you managed to get your fix. You
Yeah,
got,
yeah, yeah,
you were able to play. You had a local club that still
yeah,
gave
yeah.
you that competitive edge. When you look at your first, years or sort of time in the office,
Mm.
can you think of any examples where it was like you felt like a fish out of water?
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing was, look, you're going back into a kind of educational setting
Mm,
or work educational setting.
yeah,
At what I was going on 25 at the time, and the biggest thing for me was I was in a room in my studies with 18-year-olds just coming out of college,
yes, yeah,
and you sat there and we need to get this assignment done, and you sat there going, "We just do it, don't you?" Like
mm,
that's what we just get on with it. It's
yeah,
like, um, so that was an experience, put it that way.
yeah,
Um,
yes, yeah,
look, I think it's like you said, it's just absolute polar opposites, and maybe there is something that's ingrained in you from time and years in sport that is very much just kind of get on with it
mm,
attitude. At the time, I probably went into survival is probably an extreme word, but you
right,
probably go into a kind of I need to just get my head down for a
mm,
couple of years here.
yeah,
It was a get your head down and sort yourself out for a couple of years, and then it'll start to turn. Was
mm,
the kind of view I took.
yeah, yeah. To what extent did you have to redefine yourself, through this period?
Yeah, and that's something that I find a really interesting concept actually at the minute. And it's nice doing a little bit of mentoring with some athletes as well at the time, because there is always this question of, you know, what are your values? What are you like as a person? How do you kind of define yourself? And I've always been very much of the mind that just because you're moving away from sport doesn't mean you should change who you are and how you behave and what you want to do. I always make a bit of a joke with colleagues and some friends that I will never come across as being a typical accountant. Never. That's and some great individuals out there, right? But
Yeah.
um, why would you change your kind of strengths, your attributes, just because you've walked into a room that has a kind of different industry tag on it? Um,
Yeah.
some of the things you learn in sport all come from those personalities. So why would you change?
Yeah. Right. And so, without thinking, all right, cool, the bits that you didn't want
Mm.
to change, do you think, or what do you think you've had to
Yeah,
switch off
yeah, and look,
to be
that's probably the
successful?
perfect way of putting
Yeah.
it. There's your values, there's how you define yourself, but
Yeah.
there's do you need to rein certain areas in because you're now sat in a business setting,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that can be from anything to some of the language you potentially use in a meeting
Yeah.
or rugby sport feedback is on a minute by minute basis
Yeah.
all the time. You look
Yeah.
at a game, for example, it's feedback on the pitch.
Yeah.
You come in at half time, and if you're doing something wrong, you get told what it is
Hmm.
bluntly. I think business and work can improve on how they feedback 100% to be more like sport, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Hmm.
But I think as well, it goes the polar opposite. You have a biannual review, and
Yeah.
you've forgotten what you've done, um,
Yes.
type thing. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think there's some massive learnings there. I think there really is.
Mm.
Obviously, you have to tone down how it's done and how it's delivered.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. The value of feedback, it is something I certainly go on about, and I know anyone who has worked. Actually, I was going to say worked for me. I think just around me, I'm like,
Mm,
I'll give feedback to anyone, and it's like, yeah, I
yeah.
didn't like that. We need to do it this way instead. It's like, well, hold on, it was successful, yeah, but it could be better. It's like,
Mm,
you get this,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
design. So, well, we can keep getting better. Just because you won at the weekend, it doesn't mean
Yeah.
we don't
Yeah.
improve, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I get, you say it's something that's interesting for at the moment. I mean, I find it obviously deeply fascinating as well,
Mm,
and I wonder, is a thing that makes us an athlete or successful in sport, um, does that mean we are honed for that feedback? We take it. So mentally, we have this
yeah.
aptitude to take it. Whereas for a general population, it's like, I can't take that feedback.
Yeah, I think it's probably two pronged, isn't it? It's being able to have um, that mental clarity that feedback isn't someone having a personal attack at you. That it's
Mm.
it's for a reason. It's because they're trying to make you better, for one, or in sport. That's how I'd kind of see it.
Yeah,
And two, I guess then from the other side, it's having the confidence to pull people up, and
yeah,
not in a bad way. It's to say, look, Ryan, like we need to stop doing this because it's not working. Let's go and do something else. Now, you flip that, I guess, on its head, and in day to day world or in business and work, it's maybe more geared towards people don't like giving that direct feedback because maybe they're worried about consequences, maybe they're worried about what might come of it, and
yeah,
also that ability of, if someone gives you direct feedback, do you take it more of a, that's kind of a bit of a personal attack on me?
yes,
It's just viewed very differently, would be my opinion of it.
yeah. I think, yeah, I'm with you. I agree with you. In fact, there's a book, I'm trying to remember it. I finished it a couple of months ago, but it was called something like "The Courage to Be Disliked,"
Right.
and it is it's like a series of stories, actually, a
Mm.
series of stories
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
about, how to get the courage to be disliked. And a lot of it is around feedback and interpersonal relationships. And it really rests on the view that actually most people want to be liked. And
Yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah,
you talk about the consequence of giving feedback. Well, it's like, oh, well, maybe they won't like it. Okay,
yeah.
I'll tone it down and stuff. Whereas it seems to be, or perhaps in the throes of a sport, a game, a team game, or
Mm.
whatever it is, it's like, we're playing together. I don't care if you don't like me, just do it right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And we will win as a team. It's about the
yeah.
greater good, not about
Absolutely.
you doing something wrong. It's we're in this together.
Yeah, and maybe I've always viewed it as well. People talk about the kind of superficial white line, don't they? But you walk onto the pitch and you could have an informal way of saying a scrap with your own teammates,
Hmm.
and you're fighting, your XYZ, but you come off and you can still be best mates. You can.
Oh,
That's just the
yeah,
way it works.
yes,
Whereas away from sport, it's we've had an argument, so we're probably not going to now get on for
mm,
the next
yeah,
6 months.
that's right. It's like, well, I just told you what I thought. Yeah, I know, I didn't like it. Yeah,
Yeah,
get over it. We've done that now.
yeah,
Let's
I
move
know,
on.
I know.
Yeah,
So I think, look, maybe we need to draw a proverbial white line around kind of meeting rooms and things like that,
yes,
and
yeah.
use it like that.
Actually, that'll be good. Should Second Wind become to the extent where I've got offices and lots of employees and things like that?
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe in the meeting rooms I'll actually have like a pitch marking, and it's like,
yeah.
right, when we cross this, it's all good. Let's just go for it.
No one can take offence within this space.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. Well, I mean, look, so talking about then this, giving feedback, and I
Yeah,
suppose
yeah,
what you
yeah,
have to leave
yeah,
behind. When you think about where you are today and the
yeah.
progressions that you've made in your career, how do you think? How do you? What have you brought with you? What stuck with you? What are those attributes you think as a player that have continued to help you progress
Mm.
in
Yeah,
a corporate
yeah,
setting?
and I think it's probably, look, you get those kind of core skills that come with every sport, don't they? Like, the interpersonal skills, the ability to take on feedback, like we've just discussed, the general attributes of what is it like to get your head down and work hard, and to know
Mm,
what how to go through some kind of pain and hard periods. So those, just having those are a massive benefit, I would say.
yeah,
Um, and you get, they help you out on a day to day basis all the time. Um, More specifically, I'm not sure, Ryan, and it's hard because I think you'll see it obviously yourself with all the people you have on here. There are so many different skills that people have, strengths, weaknesses, all that good stuff. But it's how to just, I guess, lean more on some of these strengths and know how to manage those weaknesses. And it's not shying away from them, I guess. It's,
mm,
I've got some attributes that I've learned in sport. How do I really chuck them in the mix,
yeah,
but also know areas I'm weak and not be afraid to admit it?
hmm, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I really like that, and it's funny as you're talking about it, and as always, I relate this into
Mm.
sport, and I think of us as athletes and as players, and yeah, I don't know what you were like as a playing, if you ever went as front row, but you probably didn't,
No, no, God.
right? No, and so when we talk about, um, but you wouldn't see, I suspect you wouldn't have seen your relative lack of height and size as a weakness. It
No.
was, well,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. There's others who can do that, but
Mm.
you're not then going to focus on trying to build your strength to that of a prop. You're like, no, no, I
Yeah.
can, support, I'll build up my strength. But if I ever find myself first man in a ruck or whatever, I'm not
Mm.
quite going to go in the same way as a prop would.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
You'd think of how you can, I don't know, it's not a weakness. It's you'd think differently to get around that situation.
There's almost a different purpose for you, isn't there? It's
Yeah,
and people always joke about, don't they, rugby as a whole being a game for the all shapes and sizes type thing. But
Yeah.
And look, I absolutely agree, but I think that's in every sport. I think, unless you are a 100-meter sprinter who, your one goal
To run as fast.
is
Yeah.
to run as fast as you can,
Yeah.
and that's what it's on,
Yeah.
right? Everywhere, especially the team sports,
Yes.
there is so many. You talk about different individual attributes, but then it's,
Yeah. But
how's
yeah.
the way the team playing shaping around that, and what's the strategy of the team? It's
Yes. I mean, but what I would say is when you talk about the 100 meters, I'd say that's in the
mm,
sport of track and field. And
yes, yeah,
so,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
you better go and do something else. But I think the 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 point we're probably both looking for how to articulate it, but it's about, as athletes, it's playing to your strengths,
mm,
and
yeah,
actually that same thing, and your weaknesses don't stop you achieving, right?
yeah,
It's that focus on your strengths. And so when we move into that corporate world, it is, well, focus on your strengths and let the strengths
mm,
be the reason why you succeed,
yeah,
and it's not your weaknesses. Now they'll probably come up with you, right?
yes,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
right? That, and it's more, perhaps more along that angle, where it's like, yeah, know what you're good at, lean
yeah.
into it.
And we spoke. I guess we spoke before about that kind of defining yourself, and don't let your environment dictate who you want to be. And it's very
Mm,
much aligned to that, I would say. Especially you spoke about people who say, my example, going to the corporate world. It's not fixed walls. You don't have to, because you walk in this building, you don't have to only behave like that and move away from your strengths because you only can do these three things. There is always an opportunity to bring your strengths to the table in whatever environment you're in, I would say.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. So look, what inspired you to get into mentoring, and
Yeah.
and switch to play? What was the inspiration behind that for you?
So it was very much so I came with Rob Young, who I know you said you've had some involvement with on this
Yes,
podcast
indeed.
before.
Yeah.
So I think I just got chatting to Rob around. We probably had a very very similar but short conversation like we have, and he just got asking, what was it like when you moved away? I said, look, the RPA, the Rugby Players Association, which are doing a great job now. Back when I moved, they weren't what they are now, to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
And especially if you're not a well-known household name player. Um, so I just said, look, it was tough. It was tough when I moved. It was challenging, and we got chatting. He said, look, I'm running a program at the minute where it's aimed at athletes, at individuals moving away from sport. And he mentioned a mentoring program, and it just developed from that, really. And look, those guys do some outstanding work with. The cool thing about what they do is it's any sport, it's anyone from any sport, any background, and they've built a program that they look at values, how you're managing your financial health, mental health, looking ahead at career planning, things like that. Or
Hmm.
some really, really kind of tangible, useful stuff. And they've built a program around those things to help athletes, and it's all free. Like these guys are getting some seriously good stuff,
Yeah.
all for free. And Rob said, look, would you be happy to mentor on it? You have a couple of mentees, a couple of people in the program, and you're checking in, you're helping them kind of go through these workshops, and
Mm.
can you help out on any of the challenges? And yeah, of course I will, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that came from, just a chat with Rob, really.
Yeah. I mean, which is great, and I guess Rob's a very persuasive chap. Um, but
He
well, he put,
is,
yeah. I mean, he comes across really well in that I guess what he heard very quickly and knew is perhaps a desire to be able to help others
yeah, yeah,
not to go through that same situation as you did, and make a
yeah.
difference.
And look, I think the thing that meant I didn't hesitate was I completely understand that it's not a massive amount of time from my end.
Mm.
It's not a large commitment at all. I was very lucky when I moved that like we've spoken about, I had my kind of support network, my
Mhm.
my family, my friends, things like that. But sometimes it can be as useful as having someone who's properly neutral, who you can just say,
Yeah.
what do you think of this? Just
Mm.
give me your honest feedback of this. Do you think it's a good decision? Do you think it's not? And that is sometimes what's the most useful thing in my eyes.
Yeah.
So look, if I can have someone that reaches out with a text and say, look, I'm struggling with this, what do you think?
Mm.
And my 2-line response, or my 5 minutes on the phone helps them out in some respects, then yeah, of course I will.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. And well, when you think then, when you've got these young men and women
Yeah, yeah.
in that career transition, just what sort of guidance, what sort of advice do you think or what sort of advice do you give to them really?
Yeah, and there's a fine line, isn't there, between kind of letting them lead the way. That's the
Mhm.
big thing. They need to lead the way. It's their own
Fine.
path.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
What,
that
so what do you mean by that? Letting them lead the way?
so. I look. I don't think it's right for me or other mentors to say, I think you should do this.
Hmm.
I that's something we've discussed as a group. It's I've had my own experiences. I've had my way of building a career and things like that. Theirs will be completely different. And it's more of a, how do you ask the right questions? How do you, to get them to think about different things, to get them to challenge themselves such that, you know, they can become comfortable with what they're doing in themselves.
Yeah.
And again, coming back to that, just playing that kind of non-biased neutral party who, if you ask, if you ask me a question, I'm happy to help.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really interesting now. I think it's really interesting you talk there about the role, ask what advice you give, and what you're really saying is helping them to forge their own path.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and look, it's been an experience for me, having not done much of mentoring
Hmm.
myself in the
Yeah.
past. And
Yeah.
there's a couple of guys who switched to play at the minute. Adam Daniel,
Hmm.
fascinating guy in terms of his ability to mentor and coach.
Yeah.
Um, and working with him just around, how do you ask the right questions, what do you do,
Yeah.
and he's led loads of that, and it highlights some of the, did was I maybe too influential in a response I gave there,
Hmm.
or should I have been more, you know if you know if this was me, I would have done that, but let's think about how it suits to your life right now.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 Which in itself is probably a good framing for those who, because you've got those who listen to this show, who watch this show,
Yeah,
and they're doing it because they've got friends going through it, and they're
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
figure it
sure,
out. And look, the whole reason I started this show was because as athletes, we don't talk to one another enough
yeah,
about this when we're going through it, and
yeah,
when it happens to us, we often literally feel I'm the first person this has ever happened to like this. No,
yeah, yeah,
no one
yeah,
else understands me. No, so what's the point in telling anybody else?
yeah,
Um, but it's it's something that, and it's kind of occurring to me now, really. But one of the things that probably is going to be useful is helping athletes who are in it know how to support one another and ask
yeah.
one another the questions as well.
Yeah, and look, that if you can build a kind of community off this, that are happy to ask questions, to reach out to each other, like that, you're 90% of the way there, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah,
It's knowing you've got someone on the other end of the phone if you need to, right? And
yeah.
that, and I guess when people say a sentence like that, they automatically think of worst case scenario, mental health struggling, things.
Mm,
That's
yeah,
absolutely not the case. It
that's
could
right.
be the case of, I've something's happened to me at work today. I'm a bit pissed off about it.
Hmm.
What
Yeah.
are your thoughts? Like,
Hmm.
it's not a big thing, but but if you're on your own and you don't sense check that with someone, you can mentally make it a big thing.
Yes, yeah, that's right. I mean, how do you sort of
Yeah,
regulate? How do you maintain sort of your well-being,
yeah, yeah.
sense of purpose?
I know. I think it's I think it's having things on the side is important. Things away from your day-to-day job is important.
Yeah, yeah,
So look, again, I'm dead lucky still with the family network. You can come home and vent to your
hmm
missus and things like that,
yeah,
and have you complaining, have you, you things like that. But I'm lucky. I still do my coaching. I still get down to go down to the rugby club, and you
yeah,
got that classic camaraderie of 40
mm,
lads just getting together and joking around for an hour.
yeah,
So that's huge.
yeah, yeah,
And it's something that you can have a really stressful day at work, and you just make training at 1 minute to 7, and you get to half
yeah,
8, and it's like your bad day never
yeah,
happened type thing.
yeah. That's right. You're just floating by the end of it.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Gosh, love this.
yeah.
And look, I mean, it's great. There it's that connection. It's that connection to the sport.
Mm.
But it's one of the things an earlier guest mentioned. Gavin is he spoke about that connection to the emotion, and it's a
Yeah.
feeling that we look for. And,
Mm.
we got it with the field. We got it with 40 other lads. Training,
Yeah, yeah,
playing,
yeah.
and it's looking for that emotion again, and getting that
Yeah,
peace.
and it probably doesn't even have to be your sport. Like, people
Mm,
find it in going to the gym. People find it in going and doing their
that's
group classes and doing things like
yeah.
that. Like, it's more that community element, isn't it? And it's like you said with
Mm,
this podcast and the group that are on it. If there's a community of all like-minded individuals, like, there's a bit of power in it, isn't there?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, look, Tom, I've got to say thanks very much for joining me, sharing your story. I found it really interesting just
Mm.
hearing your past, but some of your thoughts and and how you're operating today. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. It's yeah, like I said, it's been great to chat through both from my end, and I think some of the work you're doing in this space is outstanding.
Yeah, great, Tom. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.